Amara sat still, the letter trembling in her hand. Termination effective immediately. The words blurred through her tears. She had served Kwon Ji-hun, the billionaire CEO, for 3 years, his right hand, his confidant, the only one who could calm his storm. And now, without warning, she was fired. No explanation, just a cold, printed letter and a man who wouldn't even meet her eyes. That night, she walked out of the tower with her dignity intact but her heart in pieces. Amara sat by the Han River, her coffee cold, her phone buzzing endlessly. She ignored every message from HR, from mutual colleagues, and especially from him, until she saw his name appear again. Kwon Ji-hun, please, meet me. One last time. I owe you an explanation. She almost ignored it, but something inside her, the same strange pull that had always drawn her toward him, won. His tailored suit slightly undone, his usual composure replaced with something raw human. Amara, he whispered as she approached. You look beautiful. She crossed her arms. You fired me, Ji-hun. Compliments don't fix that. He exhaled sharply, stepping closer. I know, and I regret it every second. But you don't understand why I did it. Then make me. He paused, his gaze trembling as he met hers. Because I was falling in love with you. Amara froze. He took another step closer, his voice cracking with honesty. Every meeting, every time you challenged me, every time you smiled, I lost focus. I was afraid. You were my manager and I didn't want to be that man, the one who abuses power for desire. So I pushed you away. I fired you because loving you scared me more than losing millions ever could. Her heart thudded painfully. So you broke me? To save your conscience? No, he said, tears glinting in his dark eyes. I broke myself. The day you walked out, this entire building felt empty. My life did. Amara, I'm not asking you to forgive the decision. I'm asking you to understand it. And to let me start over with you. He knelt suddenly, the rain beginning to fall again, soft and cold between them. I don't want you as my employee. I want you as my forever. Amara stared down at him, this powerful man who could bend markets and crush rivals, kneeling before her like a boy confessing his first love. You think a confession fixes everything? She whispered, fighting tears. No, he said gently, rising and brushing the raindrops from her hair. But maybe love can. He took her hand, pressing it to his heart. Fire me from your anger if you must, but don't shut me out of your heart. She let out a shaky laugh. You're impossible, Ji-hun. I'm yours, he whispered, and as the Seoul skyline glimmered behind them, Amara finally let her defenses melt. She reached for him, her lips trembling as they met his. The kiss was slow, trembling, drenched in rain and regret. Two souls finally colliding after running in circles too long. They no longer worked together. Amara started her own consulting firm, with Ji-hun as her biggest client and her greatest love. He still sent her flowers every morning with notes that read, "Not my manager anymore, but always my heart's CEO." And every evening, they met on the same rooftop, sharing coffee and dreams instead of contracts. Sometimes, Amara teased, "You really had to fire me to fall in love?" He would laugh softly, wrapping his arms around her waist. "No, Amara. I had to lose you to realize I couldn't live without you." And that night, under Seoul's shimmering lights, she finally believed him. The months after that night unfolded like a tender dream neither of them wanted to wake from. Ji-hun, once known as Seoul's coldest billionaire, now wore warmth like a second skin. Only Amara could see that side of him. And Amara, who once lived in fear of his temper and reputation, now saw the man behind the empire. The lonely soul who had built walls made of wealth just to hide a heart that craved love. One Sunday morning, Ji-hun surprised Amara with breakfast at her apartment. A modest space filled with books and sunlight. "Are you trying to bribe me with pancakes?" she teased, watching him flip them awkwardly. "I'm trying to prove I'm not just a suit," he muttered, burning another one. "Apparently, I can't even make breakfast for the woman I love." Amara laughed softly, stepping behind him, her hands sliding over his as she took the spatula. "Then let me help you, Mr. Billionaire." He turned to her, eyes locking on her face. "I don't deserve you, Amara." She smiled, touching his cheek. "No, Jihan. You just love me the way no one else ever has." He kissed her forehead gently, whispering, "You're the first person who made me want to be more than a name on a Forbes list." And for a moment, the world outside their little kitchen didn't exist. Just burnt pancakes, laughter, and love. But love, like any empire, has its storms. When the media caught wind of Jihan's secret relationship with his former manager, scandal flared. Articles called her names: gold digger, ambitious foreigner, the woman who seduced Korea's richest man. Amara tried to stay strong, but one evening, Jihan came home to find her curled on the couch, silent tears staining her face. "They don't see me for who I am," she whispered. "They just see what I look like next to you." He knelt before her, cupping her face. "Then they're blind, Amara, because when I look at you, I see grace. I see strength. I see the woman who changed my life. But the board, your company, let them talk," he interrupted, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You're not my scandal. You're my peace." He kissed her hands tenderly. "And if the world can't handle that, I'll build us one that can." Months later, Jihan took her to Jeju Island under the pretense of a business retreat. The sea breeze carried the scent of spring, and the cliffs overlooked an endless horizon. As the sun began to set, he handed her a simple, elegant box. Inside wasn't a ring, but a letter. "My forever Amara, I once fired you out of fear of what love could do to a man like me. But now I realize love didn't weaken me, completed me. This isn't a contract or a proposal for a show. It's a promise. Be my partner in everything. Not my employee, not my escape, just my equal. If you'll have me, let's build a new empire made of love. Jihan." Tears glistened in Amara's eyes as she looked up at him. "You're really doing this without a ring?" He grinned. "I wanted your yes before the diamond. The diamond's just the receipt." Laughing through her tears, she threw her arms around him. "Yes, Jihan. Yes." Then he slipped a ring from his pocket anyway. Sleek, silver, engraved with her name in Hangul. "Forever, Amara." They built more than love, they built legacy. Amara launched her own foundation for women of color in business. Jihan became her biggest donor and loudest supporter. Sometimes, at the top floor of Jang Holdings, they'd stand side by side before the window, fingers intertwined. "You remember the day you fired me?" she'd ask with a teasing smile. He'd sigh dramatically. "The worst business decision I ever made. But the best romantic one," she'd remind him. And he'd pull her close, murmuring, "You're not my mistake, Amara. You're my miracle." Amara stirred first, wrapped in Jihan's arms, her head resting against his chest. The steady rhythm of his heartbeat was her favorite sound, the music of peace after all the storms. He opened his eyes slowly, smiling when he found her already watching him. "You're staring again," he teased, his voice deep with sleep. "Just making sure you're real," she whispered. "Sometimes I wake up and think it's all a dream." He brushed a strand of her hair behind her ear. "If it is, then promise me you won't wake up." She laughed softly, pressing a kiss to his chest. "You're getting better at romance, Mr. Kwan. Only because you're my best teacher," he replied, pulling her closer. Their marriage was quiet and intimate. No press, no glamour. Just vows exchanged under a cherry blossom tree in Jeju, witnessed by the sea and a handful of friends. Jihan held her hand as if he was afraid she might disappear. "I once fired you because I thought love would destroy me," he said in his vows. "Now I know it saved me." Amara's tears glistened in the sunlight as she whispered, "And I once hated you for breaking me, but you rebuilt me stronger with your love." Their kiss sealed not just a union but a promise to face the world together, no matter the whispers that followed them. Marriage to a billionaire wasn't easy. There were board meetings, paparazzi, and endless scrutiny. At a charity gala one evening, A journalist whispered near the cameras. She's only there for the money. Amara smiled gracefully, pretending not to hear. But later that night, Ji-hun found her sitting by the balcony, her eyes lost in the Seoul skyline. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders. They'll always talk, Amara. But let them. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone. You've already proven it to me. She turned to him, eyes glimmering. Then promise me one thing, Ji-hun. Anything. Never let their noise drown what we are. He cupped her face gently. Never. My love for you is louder than the world. Months later, Amara stood in the bathroom, staring at 2 pink lines on the test strip. Her hands trembled. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so she did both. When Ji-hun returned home that evening, he found her standing in the living room, holding a tiny white onesie that read, Daddy's Little Empire. He froze. Wait. Amara, are you? She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. You're going to be a father. For a moment, the billionaire who once ruled boardrooms with iron calm simply collapsed to his knees, clutching her waist. His eyes filled with disbelief and joy. He kissed her stomach gently. My little miracle. Just like your mother. The months that followed were full of tender chaos. Ji-hun reading parenting books in secret, Amara teasing him for talking to her belly every night, and soft moments that redefined their love. One evening, as rain whispered against the windows, Ji-hun lay beside her, his head on her lap. Do you ever think about how far we've come? He murmured. She smiled, stroking his hair. From the day you fired me to this moment, sometimes I think fate has a sense of humor. He chuckled softly. If firing you was a mistake, it's the only one I'll never regret, because it led me here. To me. To us. Their daughter was born on a quiet spring morning. Tiny, radiant, with Amara's deep eyes and Ji-hun's quiet stare. They named her Hannah, meaning one. As Ji-hun held her for the first time, tears filled his eyes. She's perfect, he whispered. Just like you. Amara smiled tiredly. So, do you forgive yourself for firing me now? He laughed through his tears. No, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have fought to love you this deeply. He leaned over, kissing her forehead softly. You were never meant to be my employee, Amara. You were always meant to be my destiny. And as the sun rose over Seoul, lighting up the city they had once ruled separately, Amara and Ji-hun lay together. No longer CEO and manager, but husband and wife, lovers and parents, equals and forever partners. Their love story had started with an ending, and ended with forever. Jang Holdings Tower, the very building where their love story had first begun. Inside the penthouse, laughter filled the air instead of silence. Little Hannah, now 3 years old, toddled around the living room clutching her stuffed bear, while Amara hurried after her, phone tucked between her ear and shoulder. Yes, confirm the meeting for 2 p.m. And please make sure the investor understands this is a joint venture, not a takeover, Amara said, adjusting Hannah's hair with one hand. Ji-hun emerged from the hallway in a crisp shirt, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Is the CEO of AM consulting the nanny today? He teased. Amara smiled over her shoulder. And is the chairman of Jang Holdings late again because his daughter hid his shoes? Hey, she's got good taste, he said, laughing as he lifted Hannah into his arms. She only hides my expensive ones. Hannah giggled, wrapping her little arms around his neck. Appa, coffee is too hot. He blew on the mug exaggeratedly until she laughed harder. Amara couldn't help smiling at the sight. The once feared billionaire completely undone by a 3-year-old. After breakfast, Ji-hun and Amara drove together to work, different companies, but the same direction. They made it a rule. No business talk before 9 a.m. and after 7 p.m. It wasn't easy. They both led empires. Investors demanded time. Employees demanded guidance. The world demanded perfection. But every demand had its boundary. Because between 7 p.m. and sunrise, they were not CEO and founder. They were just Ji-hun and Amara, 2 people trying to love each other right. At the office, Ji-hun often found himself watching her across a boardroom table during joint meetings. Confident, poised, radiant in her element. He would smile silently, remembering the day she had walked into his office as his manager, fearless even then. Sometimes their colleagues noticed. "Sir, you're smiling again," his assistant whispered once. "Let me," Jihan replied. "It reminds me what all this is for." Evenings were sacred. No matter how long the day had been, they came home to one another. Amara would cook while Jihan read bedtime stories to Hannah, his once deep commanding voice now turning cartoonishly high-pitched for fairy tales. "Appa again," Hannah would shout every time the story ended. He'd sigh dramatically. "You're more demanding than my shareholders." From the kitchen, Amara would laugh. "And you love it." Later, after Hannah fell asleep, they'd sit by the balcony overlooking Seoul's lights, wine glasses in hand, shoulders touching. Amara leaned into him. "We used to talk about profits. Now we talk about preschool." Jihan smiled. "And somehow, this feels like the best deal of my life." She laughed quietly. "That's because this one doesn't need negotiation." He turned to her, voice soft. "No, because this time, I have everything I ever wanted." There were still storms, always would be. A market crash once shook Jihan's empire. At the same time, Amara faced pressure from investors doubting her ability to balance motherhood and leadership. But they leaned on each other. When Jihan came home one night exhausted, Amara was waiting with tea. "The company can be rebuilt," she said gently. "But don't forget, you're more than your numbers." He looked at her, eyes softening. "You always remind me who I am." "And who's that?" "The man lucky enough to come home to you." And when Amara broke down weeks later after being criticized in a business magazine, Jihan held her close. "They see a woman trying to do it all," he whispered. "But I see my wife doing it perfectly, every single day." Years later, as Hannah started school, they stood outside the gates, hands clasped. "She's growing up fast," Amara murmured. "Just like her mother," Jihan said. Amara smiled, glancing up at him. "Have you ever missed the chaos of our early years?" He shook his head. "No, because that chaos gave me this peace." They watched Hannah wave from the gate before running off to class. The wind carried her laughter through the morning air. Amara turned to him. "We did it, Jihan. We found balance." He slipped his arm around her waist. "No," he said softly. "We built it." And as they stood there, husband and wife, parents and partners, the empire of their love stood taller than any tower they owned. Because in the end, their greatest achievement wasn't wealth or status. It was harmony. It was home. It was forever. Years had passed since Jihan and Amara's love story began in a boardroom and bloomed into a family. Now, their daughter Hannah was 5, and laughter filled the halls of the mansion they once feared would feel too big. But even in their peace, Jihan and Amara still dreamed. Not just for themselves, but for others. One evening, as the three of them sat by the fireplace, Hannah coloring beside them, Amara leaned against Jihan's shoulder and said softly, "Do you ever think about what comes next?" He smiled. "We have everything, Amara. What could possibly come next?" She looked at him with that spark he'd always admired, the one that once made her fearless in meetings. "Not for us," she said. "For them. For people like I once was, young, determined, but locked out of opportunities." Jihan turned fully toward her, his eyes deepening. "You mean giving back?" "I mean building something bigger than us," she said. "A foundation that helps women from Africa and Asia start businesses. A bridge between two worlds that once tried to keep us apart." He stared at her, speechless for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Then let's do it. Together." And that was how the Hannah Foundation was born, named after their daughter, symbolizing unity, growth, and new beginnings. They started small mentorship programs, microgrants, and scholarships. Amara handled the vision. Jihan brought structure and global partnerships. Together, they were unstoppable. While Amara traveled to Nairobi and Lagos to meet young entrepreneurs, Jihan handled Seoul's corporate giants, convincing them to invest not in profit, but in potential. And every night, no matter where they were in the world, they'd video call each other. "Did you eat?" He'd ask, even if she was halfway across the world. Did you rest? She'd ask, even if she knew he hadn't. Sometimes, their calls ended with quiet smiles and whispers of, I miss you. Their love had matured. Not fiery like before, but steady, patient, unbreakable. Within 5 years, the Hannah Foundation became one of Asia's leading initiatives for women entrepreneurs. CNN, BBC, and Forbes featured Amara and Ji-hun as the power couple bridging continents. During a press conference, a journalist asked Amara, Mrs. Kwan, how do you balance love, family, and such global success? Amara smiled warmly. Balance isn't about dividing time. It's about sharing purpose. Ji-hun and I don't just love each other. We believe in the same dream. Ji-hun, standing beside her, reached for her hand. And she's the dream I believe in most. The cameras flashed wildly, but all Ji-hun saw was her smile. The same one that had changed his life years ago. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ji-hun took Amara back to the same rooftop where he'd first confessed his love. The place where rain had once fallen on heartbreak. Now, the night was clear, the stars soft above the city. He handed her a small box again. Amara laughed. Another ring? He nodded. Yes, but not just for love this time, for partnership. Inside was a platinum band engraved with the words, Dreams built together never fall apart. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she looked up at him. You've given me so much already, she whispered. He took her hands, his voice gentle but sure. You gave me more. Purpose, peace, and a reason to dream again. I want to spend the rest of my life building more with you. For our daughter. For the world. And under Seoul's starlit sky, they renewed their promise. Not just to love, but to build, to uplift, and to keep dreaming together. Years later, the Hannah Foundation expanded into education, technology, and sustainability. Amara and Ji-hun's empire evolved into something far greater than wealth. It became a movement. Everywhere they went, people spoke of them not just as a couple, but as a symbol of unity, the Korean billionaire and the African visionary who built a bridge made of love and purpose. At home, Hannah watched her parents work late nights at the dining table, laughing, debating, planning, and she smiled, knowing she wanted to be just like them. One evening, she ran to them holding a drawing. Appa, look, I drew our family and our building. Amara smiled. What's that one called? Hannah grinned. The House of Dreams. Ji-hun looked at Amara, eyes soft. She understands already. Amara squeezed his hand. Because she grew up inside one. And so, their love, once born from heartbreak and fear, became a legacy of hope and creation. They had built wealth, yes. They had built a family. But most of all, they had built a greater dream, one that would outlive them both. And every night, as they watched the city lights flicker below, Ji-hun would whisper, See what we've done, Amara? We turned love into a lifetime. And she would smile, resting her head on his shoulder. No, Ji-hun. We turned love into forever. Their home, known privately as the House of Dreams, sat on the hillside above the city. Not just a symbol of luxury, but a living memory of everything Ji-hun and Amara had built together. Inside, the air was peaceful, soft jazz played in the background, the faint scent of Amara's vanilla candles filling the room. Amara moved gracefully through the kitchen, barefoot, wearing one of Ji-hun's shirts. She hummed quietly as she stirred dinner, her movements slow and elegant. Ji-hun leaned against the doorway, tie loosened, eyes filled with quiet admiration. Every time you cook, he said, smiling, it feels like you're performing a love song I don't deserve. Amara laughed softly. That's because you don't cook, Ji-hun. You just order Michelin stars. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. I built an empire, he murmured against her ear. But you built a home. She leaned into him, her voice a whisper. That's because home isn't walls or gold, Ji-hun. It's us. Later that night, Hannah sat between them on the couch, reading her storybook. Appa, she said, when I grow up, can I work at your company and Umma's foundation? Jihan smiled. You can work anywhere your heart leads you, my little dream. Amara brushed Hannah's curls. Just promise you'll always follow what makes you happy. Hannah nodded seriously. Then I'll work where you both are, because that's where happiness lives. Jihan glanced at Amara, his heart tightening with love. She's got your wisdom already. Amara smiled. And your stubbornness. They laughed together, a sound that filled the house like warmth on a cold night. After putting Hannah to bed, the couple retreated to their private balcony, wrapped in blankets and silence. The city lights shimmered far below, but their world was just this, the two of them close and still. Jihan reached for her hand. Remember the night I fired you? He said quietly, a smile tugging at his lips. Amara chuckled. How could I forget? You looked so serious I thought I'd ruined your company. He turned to her, eyes soft. You didn't ruin anything, Amara. You saved me from a life without love. She rested her head on his shoulder. You made me believe love could be gentle again. They sat there, hearts beating in rhythm with the quiet night. The days passed like poetry, small gestures that spoke volumes. Jihan left her handwritten notes on her pillow before he left for meetings. You're my peace in every storm. Amara packed his lunch with little reminders. Don't forget, your heart works better when you smile. On weekends, they cooked together. She teased him when he burned the rice. He teased her when she danced around the kitchen in socks. Sometimes, they danced without music, slow, close, just swaying in each other's arms. Do you realize? Amara whispered one evening, we never needed perfection, just presence. Jihan smiled. And love. Endless, ordinary, beautiful love. Years later, the House of Dreams became more than a home. It became a gathering place for family and friends, a safe haven where laughter always lived. On quiet nights, when Hannah was asleep, Jihan and Amara would sit by the fire, their fingers intertwined, the flames reflecting in their eyes. This house, Jihan said once, his voice soft, it's more than walls. Amara nodded. It's our story, from pain to peace to forever. He kissed her hand, his heart full. Then promise me something. What's that? She asked, smiling. No matter where life takes us, we'll always come back here. Amara's eyes glistened. Always, Jihan, because this house isn't just ours. It's us. And so, every corner of the House of Dreams whispered their story. The fired manager and the broken billionaire who rebuilt each other, who turned power into partnership and turned love into legacy. Inside that house, they laughed, they worked, they dreamed, and every day they fell in love all over again. The night had grown quiet, the moonlight spilling through the glass walls like silk. Jihan and Amara sat together by the fire. No words left to say, only the kind of silence that lovers share when every heartbeat already speaks. He brushed her cheek with his thumb and whispered, we've built companies, we've built a family, but the greatest thing we ever built was us. Amara smiled, her eyes glimmering in the firelight. And even when the world forgets our names, the walls of this house will remember every laugh, every touch, every dream we dared to live. He leaned closer, his voice low, his breath warm against her ear. You are my forever, Amara, the beginning and the home of every tomorrow. She smiled through her tears, whispering back, and you, Jihan, you are the heartbeat of mine forever. Their lips met softly, not with the urgency of youth, but with the quiet strength of a love that had weathered time and triumphed over fear. Outside, the city slept. Inside the House of Dreams, two souls stayed awake, wrapped in the kind of love that doesn't fade, doesn't end, doesn't need words, just forever. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment. Also share and subscribe to my channel and click on the notification icon so that you will get notified whenever a new story is uploaded.